Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Uncovered. I am Erik Sexton, which is actually God in Germans, the billion-dollar broker. Welcome to another episode of Commercial Real Estate Uncovered. I'm Erik Sexton, and I am here with Doug Roberts, who is a partner at Panattoni Development, which is one of the nation's biggest industrial developers. And also, you guys have expanded into Europe. We'll get into that a little later. But Doug, thank you so much for being here with me today and taking some time out of your busy schedule. One thing I always like to do is kind of go through someone's resume real quick so people listening go, okay, well, this is just a developer. It's like, well, no, it's a developer who's built a few things. You, just to name a couple things, you did a 1.4 million square foot building in Reno. You've done 1.3 million square feet again in Reno, and I can just go down this list. 68,000 square feet in Las Vegas, 600,000 square feet, the IGT building off of Buffalo and Patrick that we talked about. And when I go down this list, you've got 450,000, 500,000 square feet, 600,000 square feet. So the reason I like to mention these in the beginning is you know a thing or two about development, and we bump into each other quite a bit in just being in the industry. And you're one of the people that when you talk, I really listen because you've been there, done that, a lot of these developments. And I like to learn from the people who have been through maybe some pains and wins versus, just having to go through it myself. So that's why I mentioned those buildings. So thank you so much for being here with me today on a Wednesday morning. I know you a bunch of places you could be. So
my pleasure. Yep.
No, thank you so much. So I wanted to talk about, your past a little bit. Before we get into your resume and some of the topics we wanted to talk about. So you went to Iowa State.
I did.
And then when did you move to Nevada after you went to Iowa State?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a journey.
A little bit of a journey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Originally Southern California until I was 10. My dad was a college professor.
Okay.
So when I was 10, they moved, my family moved to Iowa. And really, as dumb as it sounds, I was in my senior year in college, and I think I got to pick a school, and it was right outside of Ames, and I said I'll go to Iowa State. So I went to Iowa State, graduated in the early 80s. And then I was married at the time, came out west to my ex-wife, went to law school at UC Davis. And unfortunately, the marriage didn't last, but I stayed in Sacramento. Okay. And then met my wife I've been with for 37 years. And she and I have been married since 1992. She was a lawyer for a while, then started practicing. And frankly, I was starting to travel a lot for my job. Okay. And then we moved to Reno in 2001, really to try to get me off the road, because I was going all over the country doing stuff for various companies and with Panattoni. But Reno afforded us the ability to stay home more, travel to Las Vegas, Phoenix, wherever, but it was in the same time zone. It was quicker flights, and I could be with the family.
Okay. So I am curious. I've known you just from the industry, seeing you at SIOR and NAIOP events and that kind of thing. You're always polished and well-spoken. I'm curious, what was college Doug like? Were you polished and like on the chess club, or was there like a party side, or what athlete? What was Doug in college like?
Well, I had visions of playing football at Iowa State. I was a pretty good high school football player.
Okay, so you're an athlete.
Got a bunch of honors and all conference and yada yada. And so I thought, well, I'll try to walk on, join the Iowa State weightlifting club so I can gain more weight. It just never got there. Okay. And then I became a very young father. Oh, okay. So I was actually playing in rock bands all through high school, and then I played professionally through most of my college to try to earn money, and I'm having fun.
What instrument did you play?
I was a bass player.
Bass player.
I play guitar now too, because you get kind of tired of playing bass for 40 or 50 years.
Okay.
Kind of boring, but
rock band. I would have not have guessed that.
Yeah, well, we all have our past, right? I still play, not as much as I want, but then as a young father, I worked full time, because I had to get a job and support the family. And so by the time my sophomore year in college came around, I was Mr. Studious because I didn't have a choice, right? I worked basically 40 hours a week, went to school full time, had one kid during my oldest daughter, one kid when I was 19, and then my second one was born when I was 22.
Really? Okay.
So at that time, it was more about just getting settled and getting through life, trying to get myself set up for college. So, after college. So my degree was in sociology. I wasn't planning on being in the development field. I was actually trying to be in more social work. Working with troubled youth was kind of my passion. And I did that through a couple, when I was doing summers with the Iowa Youth Corps. And then when I moved to Sacramento, I got a job with the Conservation Corps in Sacramento, working with the urban youth again. I worked at juvenile hall for a while. And then at some point I said, I need to make some money. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I worked construction, and my dad was a landscape architect professor, so he taught me how to build things. Very technical guy, kind of old school, the way he went about business. And so we had to work on the farm outside of Ames, and it was a very classic upbringing, fishing, doing all the stuff you do as a kid, but you worked a lot. So for me, construction was fairly easy. I understood it. I framed houses, built decks, poured concrete. And so when I got into trying to get in the development field, I knew how things came together. So it was kind of a natural flow for me on how to construct a building, but it was on a scale that I was obviously not used to, but that kind of a duck to water, for lack of better words.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I have a question about, you said you were a competitive athlete. Do you feel that, like, the reason I ask this question is I find that working with, in real estate, former college athletes, or they're really good to work with because they're disciplined and they're structured. A lot of times that college sports or high school sports teaches you how to be disciplined, and as far as like set up a structure of how you work.
Right.
Do you think that affects that discipline maybe still in effect today?
Yeah, and my wife's the same way. Very working out every day, at least an hour a day. When you travel, it's tough. I was talking to a colleague this morning, and we talked about traveling and how it's, you got to eat right, and working out in a different gym every time you're traveling. When we were in Europe, most gyms are in the basement 3 levels down. I mean, it's just, you just have to, but if you don't make time for it, I don't feel right. But you kind of gravitate to what you're good at. I was a good football player. I was a good baseball player. But when I started lifting weights in college to try to gain weight to be, because at the time it was Big 8. I was a linebacker and a tight end. It was too short to be a tight end.
Okay.
Linebackers in the Big 8 at the time. This is, again, 1980. You had to be 230, 240, and I was 205, maybe 210, and wasn't going to make it. It's just, unless I did something illegal, which I wasn't going to do, I wasn't going to get there. So I just kind of gave up on that. But nonetheless, after lifting weights for a while, I found that I was good at that. I gained, weight very easily, muscle mass, which, sometimes, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger said at the time that not everybody can run the 9 flat 100. Not everybody can be a bodybuilder. You just have to have a body morph for it, right? And so I just had that body morph. And it's worked out. My son's exact same body type as I do, and he's gained the same weight I did. So you just kind of look at it and say, I started lifting weights, and I became not obsessed with it, because that's not a good word. I'd work out 2.5 hours a day or something, and go to Gold's Gym and do the whole thing, and that became, very regimented part of my life. Even though I still had kids and jobs and stuff, it's just something I did. And at the time, of course, my wife was in law school, so she wasn't around anyway, and so I was able to fill my time with working out in addition to work. So, and then I did martial arts for about 10 years, enjoyed that. Schedule kind of got away from that, and then I continued to work out and do what I needed to do, to keep myself in shape. But I do agree with you; it does form that basis for discipline, and how your work ethic continues beyond work into your after hours.
100%. Yeah, I reference that because one of the guys who was one of my original brokers was a Ohio State golfer, and there's another guy who is here in town. They were on the Ohio State golf team, and just realized that they took some of that, structure and work ethic from that into their work. And we actually had 2 guys at our office that were professional athletes. One was also a professional UNLV golfer, and then one was a Baylor football player. They ended up moving to Texas, their team, but you could tell that kind of thing is the same thing with some people from the military. Sometimes they come into the office. It's funny. I sent you this outline of stuff I wanted to talk about, but you hit on something that I'm going to jump segments here a little bit. But I wanted to ask you. You travel a lot, and you've had a very I'll call it a successful career. About how you stay sharp, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you. Real estate. The question I wanted to ask was how you stay on top of your game. If you have any routines and working out, you said is important to you. And the reason I ask this is brokerage and development. People see the side of these events where there's a lot, there's partying or there's happy hours and that. And I notice a lot of the big brokers and developers, they'll make an appearance, and a lot of them don't even go because they're busy doing other things. I mean, they are great networking events, but I also notice that a lot of brokers and developers are very disciplined in their time. So how do you manage travel and family and work and do that. So is working out one? Do you have any other secret sauce? Are you one of these 4 a.m. cold plunge, push up, only eat certain things on certain days kind of thing? Like how do you physically stay able to do that?
It's funny you mentioned cold plunge. My wife is obsessed with cold plunge, and we tease each other about it because she's so into it. I haven't got there yet. I've done it a couple times. I get it, so I understand what she's talking about, but the cold plunge thing is uncomfortable in the morning, and that's what she likes to work out. I'm a night guy. I like to work out at night. Yeah. She works out first thing in the morning. I think you're right. The routine, I'm not a late night party guy. That's not me. Some of my transition, which is not on the resume, is I'm no longer the partner for Nevada. And that's been assigned to a guy named Tim Shaler, who's from Sacramento, who's taken over Nevada. So my official title now is President National Development Group. So I'm on the executive committee and the investment committee for the company. There's 4 of us, or 5 of us actually on that committee, the Panattonis and the CFO and the president. So for me, what I have to do is look at my workload, look at who I need to get in front of and why, what my goals are. I still have properties here in Reno, a lot of land in both locations I'm working on, but I'm just here to support Tim. But I think for me, it's a matter of what I read and whose best practices I'm paying attention to. Brokers are our clients. That's how we look at it. We love the tenants, but really it's the brokers, because the brokers are the ones who can bring us the tenants. And if I can keep the brokers happy, they'll keep bringing me tenants. As long as I perform for them, I pay them on time, do the things you're supposed to do, and you're a good person, they'll respect you and they want to do business with you. And the conferences, although I find them interesting and I always learn something, I'm really there to see people. And again, my clients, my brokers, and that's what I want to see. If I go to an SIOR conference or Icon West or East, or I'll be at the Colliers Conference in Toronto in a couple weeks. It's mostly to make that contact and find out what's going on. If you stop learning, you stop growing. I mean, I've built 60-some million feet in my career, and I've built 55 buildings for Amazon over the last few years, which is not on the resume because you're not, it's not something you can tout, but you've seen pretty much everything. We're getting into data centers now. I have not seen those. I'm trying to be, a quasi, at least an early expert in that, where I can kind of figure out how it needs to be done. So you always got to learn and keep going, because that's the next growth phase, and where the gold mine, if you will, or the gold rush rather. So I think for me, I want to be around people who are going to help me get to the next level, whatever that is. And my career spanned, I've been doing this for 30 some years, and most people say, well, why don't you retire? It's like, I'm just not ready to give up the game. I'm still enjoying myself, and I feel like I still have things to offer. I have people within the company I want to help bring up to the next level and to have them grow. But it's really the joy in the business. And I tell people, when you do industrial development, these are not complicated buildings for the most part. Some are. It's the deal hunt. That's what you like. That's what I enjoy, is getting to know people, and every day is different.
That's funny. When I started by asking you about your routine in the morning, and then you started talking about development, you kind of perked up in your chair and got excited. So you can tell that you love what you do. I mean, that it's exciting. I just want to touch base. You hit some things I wanted to get to. That's why I love these podcasts. These conversations can just keep going. Mm-hmm. But so just kind of your routine. So you work out regularly, it sounds like. And then, it sounds like you and your wife have a good relationship as far as like the cold plunges and that. So you're relatively healthy. How do you stay sharp and on top of like the market news and trends that are going on? You mentioned that you go to a lot of events to keep relationships going, but you're obviously learning there. But are there any publications you read regularly, or even podcasts you listen to that give you good information that people should check out?
Ironically, I'm not a podcast person. I just I couldn't tell you on my phone where to find one. I hear them. And
I'll send you a link to this one.
But I mean, there's several different ways. I talk to brokers a lot. I give them calls. I talk to our partners in the field. Hey, what are you seeing? I think it's a matter of, I review LinkedIn every single day, sometimes twice a day, look at the threads, what's going on. I look at what our European operations are doing, what they're posting. And then I try to look at what articles are coming out, especially data center articles, and who's doing what. And in the data center world, the numbers are so much larger than we deal with. So I want to understand the capital side of it, why the returns are there. But because it's such a mammoth amount of money these people are spending on these data centers, I think probably LinkedIn is my best professional, because I can just scroll and look at it. Okay. I don't do Instagram, those other things. I'm just not a TikTok person. I don't understand what that's all about.
You don't have a dance channel on TikTok with
I don't,
20 million followers.
Yeah, my kids probably yell at me about that, but I'm not that person. And I think NAOP has good publications. SIOR does the lunches I used to go to, now Tim's going to, were really, really informative, because you always had a new speaker, you had a different sponsor, but you also have time at the end to talk, which is probably the most informative piece. Well, what's happening? And it's real-time information. But because we have 14 offices here, 2 in Canada, 20-some in Europe, you get real-time feedback all the time on what's going on, because trends, they happen quickly, and you just need to be on top of them.
Things are moving a million miles an hour. Before we started, we were talking about Europe and how your job has now expanded into Europe a little bit, and or not a little bit. It sounds like a lot. And I was there's a conference I go to in Cannes, France. It's called MIPIN. It's a commercial real estate conference. The structure is a lot different than some of the stuff I've seen here. And Panattoni always has an awesome presence, because it's the south of France, like CBRE, right. JL, all the brokerages. They have these really neat booths on the beach, but you guys have a great one that's like on the top of the convention center with a view of the port and everything. Can you tell me a little bit about your role now, going from Nevada and Arizona to doing some work in Europe, like what your role is there right now?
Well, just for clarity, my role really there is to look at best practices and what they're up to. So I don't have a direct role. Because I'm the Amazon single point of contact for the United States, I have to be, Amazon asks us to be aware of what other offices are doing within our company as well as other competitors. And Amazon has a very unique approach to development where you have to be in the same sandbox as your competitors. In other words, if you're not playing ball with everybody else, you share new ideas, a new mousetrap, then they're not going to give you more work.
Okay.
And it's for the sole goal of servicing the client. We understand that, but it also levels a playing field. So if I go to Europe and say, hey, what are you guys doing about this, and this, or how are you approaching, capital or whatever, it's because I want to learn what they're doing and take it back here and say, how can we implement this here, or vice versa. Maybe they're doing things here that are innovative that they can learn from. And we also, we opened up the Middle East. We announced that this week, and then India as well. It's been about a year, maybe a year and a half. So I think, I think Carl's one of those people, if you're not growing, you're dying, and he's doesn't seem to want to stop, and which is,
I love that. That's
God love him for doing that and have that mentality. But I think get back to your initial question, really is, I think where we're trying to do is just continue to grow our national platform, where if we do a deal in Las Vegas or in Denver or wherever it is, that we can talk to that client about doing work elsewhere. And we're not going to be, preferred developers for a client is hard to get. We're a preferred developer for Amazon, from other companies, but that all it does is put you in the conversation. That's what you want. I mean, can I just be part of the conversation and be considered for development in their location? I'm just trying to make sure that our company is top of mind for our brokerage partners who help us make sure we are part of the conversation. And then I also have national marketing under my purview, so that's been interesting because I never thought of myself as a marketing person, but I think it goes hand in hand with what I'm trying to accomplish on the other side. And I have some great people that we have internally and externally helping with that. So I think really it's national platform establishment. Plus I sit on the investment committee, so I get to see a lot of different projects come over our desk, and I have a chance to review them and talk to the partners about them. And we vote, on them either every Monday or online, just to keep the projects going forward. Here's what I see, my experience, and a lot of these guys are my colleagues for 20 years, so I know them very well. But there's certain things I see and they see that we can help each other and trying to get the things over the finish line.
You mentioned something about kind of culture. I know Panattoni has a unique relationship with brokers, and different brokerages and different developers have entirely different images. And I'll get asked by newer agents sometimes, like, hey, what's the best brokerage? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of good ones. It's like, what are you looking for? You want corporate or franchise or mom and pop? It really depends what kind of agent you want to be and what your goal is.
Right.
And you have, Panattoni, you talk about culture a little bit. Like, where do you get your kind of, let's call it a vibe, like Panattoni vibe, or like the image that you guys like to put out? Is there do you guys have any Panattoni like in-house rules or slogans or anything you guys like to live by?
Yeah, they're really, we kind of call them Carlisms. There's like 10 things that are published. I think they were in Commercial Property News a few years ago, or 10 things that Carl lived by.
Okay.
That set the ethos for the company. One thing which is top of mind, is no jerks. There's no jerks internally, and if you have a jerk client, you can fire him. That's fine.
Love it.
And that's, it's a pretty simple mantra that it's hard to implement sometimes because you look at the dollar and say, well, I can make this much money, but frankly, you might as well cut your losses because somehow, some way, if they're a jerk by definition, something's going to go wrong. Either it's an honesty issue or whatever. But I think that's a pretty mainstay of the company, and we
no jerks.
Yeah,
and
he has a hat that says no jerks on it.
That's a tough lesson to learn, especially when you might just be new and you're not making any money, and you have somebody making your life miserable. But you said like that paycheck. What I wish it took me too long to realize this because I had to walk away from a client I was making money on, but he made my life miserable.
Right.
And what somebody told me was, if you walk away from him and you're spending that energy on it, you don't know what other opportunities are out there. So a lot of times that is works out for the best. So that's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
So
another one's like no dead bodies.
Okay.
If you walk away from a project, especially if you sell the project, make sure there's nothing that somebody's going to discover later on. There can't be. In other words, with development, there's always lingering things. It's just nature of the beast. And if you build a 1 million square foot project and there's a piece of pipe that's supposed to be connected half a mile down the road and you didn't do it, that's a dead body because you didn't take care of it. And those are things that can just drive you crazy because you want to make sure that you're competent enough to know what the open items are and disclose it or get it taken care of. But there are things like that I think keep the company kind of honest because. And I think some of it, backtracking a little bit, Panattoni's very unique, and in Europe it's been unique, and I think caused our meteoric rise in our size, is because we give each partner equity position. I mean, you truly own the project, and that's pretty rare. I think there's other companies that do it. I think Germany, some other companies, Seafree, for example, have the same type of structure. But what it allowed for me and a kid who had zero money to my name. Who came in and the company believed in me and Carl Panattoni especially. He said, "Hey, we think you have some talent. And we're going to do this," and they basically have to front you money to get you started. Once you get buildings going, you sell a few, you're able to repay the loans, if you will, get yourself on the black side of the line, and then you get more money and kind of reserves. You can make your own capital calls. It takes a long time. It really does. I mean, I think people's vision of developers, they're making all this money, but it's years and years and years of continuing to fight that fight. And you have setbacks like the GFC, things where you don't anticipate that black swan event that happens in COVID, which went the other way, went in economically in a good way for industrial. But I think that makes us, as owners in the company, and we actually own the buildings, we have a huge incentive to make sure we treat people right. Because you don't want to be that one and done guy. You're in the market, it makes a big difference how you treat people.
Well, that not only is the right thing to do, so that's I've never heard that, no dead bodies, but that's not only the right thing to do, but you really make a career and you really make your money on repeat business.
Right.
And if you development brokerage is a small business. I mean, even in regions like Las Vegas, you burn a couple bridges and you can be done, period, or in a market. So
and you won't even know why.
Yeah, that's true. And
it's a silent hand that kind of like that.
Yeah, so to put it bluntly, you screw one or two people over, people don't want to work with you. So that's a good one. No dead bodies. Are there any other one of those 10 rules that you stand out?
Just one personal one I have is trust me, be honest, and trust me, be competent. If you don't have one, the other one doesn't do any good. You got to be honest and competent. You can't just be competent and dishonest. So I always tell people, look, I have to know what I'm doing, but I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'll be transparent in my process. And if I'm not doing that, then you have a right to let me go. But I think other things that kind of keep your eyes on the prize is really, you just have to treat people the way you want to be treated. I mean, it's just the golden rule, as we all think. But I think it's the way that, if Carl Panattoni or Aiden Panattoni would sit next to me, they'd be like normal people. There's no difference between how they treat people in a restaurant or treat people in a boardroom. You just have to treat people with respect. And some of it is, and I told my mom's still with us, and she just has that that very kind demeanor about her. And my dad was the same way. It's like, you just don't want to be that person that treats people the way that you would be embarrassed if your mom saw it. It's just like that. That's kind of like that angel above, right? Making sure you do the right thing.
And also, too, you don't know if someone's having a bad day. It might not be their whole MO, and you might make it worse. You don't know what people's going through. So I like that, just being respectful of people. I had an unpleasant experience with a waiter last night. I was with some friends after the gym, and he was like, I ordered something, and I didn't want any sauce on it. And he was really snarky about it. And I was like, well, I didn't say anything, but my immediate reaction, but you don't know what he's going through.
Right.
And also he's bringing you food. I have a rule. Don't mess with people who are going to bring you food.
And 1-800 numbers at a financial institution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned data centers. I've gotten to learn a little bit about these. I actually where I mentioned the Panattoni, you guys have a wonderful station at the MIPIN conference every year. They had a couple breakout sessions about data centers, and that's something I want to learn more about without going too far into detail. Like, what are you guys doing with data centers right now? Obviously, you're trying to develop them, but what's drawing you to them? Just the demand, why is that?
Yeah.
You said it might be the golden ticket, right? Or the gold rush is what you said, right?
I think in some degree, I mean, to be honest with you, right now we're doing zero other than learning. And we have relationships and things we're working on that will allow us to grow the platform. And I have no doubt we'll get into the space. And, I've been charged with opening the data center business. So I've looked at 3 different ways. You can hire for talent, you can joint venture, you can buy somebody small who wants to get scale because of our, our size globally. So all 3 of those in the works. And I think, I predict by the end of 24, we'll have a data center project, either in a fee business or ownership or something, one of our land pieces. But it's very opaque on purpose. In other words, data centers in general have so many people running on them to say, well, I can sell my land for a data center and probably make 2-3 times what industrial dirt's worth, right? And they all have the same vision. And, well, that guy sold it for $25 and mine's worth 10 now. I can sell it for 27. Or it's all based on one thing, power. Fiber's important, water's important in some parts of the country, but it's all power. And so what I look at data centers is if you have a water pipe, and the huge pipe come to your property and there's no water in it, you have a problem. If you can tell the water company, hey, could you turn the water on? They say, well, I have no water, or I can give you this much water. Same thing with electricity. People call me, hey, I've got these huge power lines by my property and there's a substation nearby. I'm like, that's great. You can get power delivered to you. Can you get power delivered to you? And every power company in the country is doing the same thing. They're all backed up on studies. They have to determine how much megawatts they have. And for every megawatt of data centers, $10 million in cost. So a $100 million 100 megawatt data centers costing $1 billion. So the dollars are way up there. The ability for a power company to deliver power is 3 to 5 years sometimes. Silicon Valley is 15 to 20 years out. So you have to plan well in advance, and the stakes are so high because the dollars are so high. So we're walking, but we're trying to run at the same time, so we get there. But we have so much land, so much infrastructure, so many relationships. We'll figure it out. It's just a matter of time.
The data centers are interesting. I was actually working with a specific user here in town. They ended up going to Arizona, but one of the things they told me they needed for their use was they needed 3 different internet providers, 3 different data points. And I was like, well, that's strange. And they're like, no, if one goes down, they're like, we're sending out financial information. Mm-hmm. They were saying they needed that. I'm like, I don't even know if we have 3 in Las Vegas. I mean, we've got, I think they're called Embark now, and obviously Cox is the big one.
Right.
But yeah, that was interesting. They ended up going to Arizona because they found a building that had the power, water. For cooling is a big deal, and the data part. So that was a learning experience. At least I know the questions to ask now if I get another one. So there was one I was reading about. Actually working on putting data centers on the moon, which I didn't quite understand that. I don't know. There's some. It's very early on, but I thought that was pretty innovative. So that's interesting. Yeah, that's a new space that everyone's going into. So we covered how you stay. So what? So you said you're not as much in Las Vegas. I kind of wanted to talk about Las Vegas as far as how you feel Southern Nevada and Arizona are connected, but you're obviously still connected here. How do you foresee Las Vegas growing in the next 1 to 10 years? I mean, you guys have some sort of outlook or projection or just even feelings on it?
Yeah, we're still pretty bullish. I mean, I think Reno's been my my home, and obviously I spend the majority of my time in Reno, it's really a matter of, will Nevada continue to gain where California's fallen down?
Okay.
And
you mean politically in California?
I mean business climate, the thing, it's like
business climate, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, I'm from California. I spent many years in California. Still have a house there. So it's a matter for me of saying, okay, where are we set up to continue to grow based on the woes of our the biggest neighbor we have, and one of the largest economies in the world. And I think the answer is yes, but I think we have a little bit of a rat through a snake right now. We have so much product coming online, which have been planned for the last couple of years that finally come to fruition, starting to deliver. The vacancies are going up substantially, both in Reno and here. And I think you'll have a fairly bumpy 12 to 18 months. The capital markets are still wonky. Treasuries, spiked up again, which for us, we live in two different worlds. We live on SOFR funds for our construction, and then we live on treasuries for the exit. So if treasuries are going up, the exit's going up, that means our construction costs, our yields have to go up, and they become like a stair-step process sometimes, one going down, one going up. So I think the capital markets is still a big question mark. Banks are still hesitant to lend. The ones that are going forward are going to be delivered, and they're going to have to wait, and they're probably going to be some rent reduction. There's no doubt in my mind we'll see a backward slide. It's just math. You can't avoid it. But I think long term, I think Las Vegas is well positioned. I think that this, even though we have land constraints and there's geographic issues with that, you're still well positioned because you're so close to California. It's a fairly business friendly state, and I do think, and I told this to Tim when he was coming in, Las Vegas has some of the best brokers in the country.
I agree.
And I say that, and people go, they think of Las Vegas like, hey, it's gaming and that kind of thing, but. The amount of camaraderie and sharing of information and friendliness and ability to work together, it's way better than a lot of markets I've been in.
Oh, that's interesting coming from you.
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's like we all have to compete but get along. And it's like, if we're talking about burning the bridges, if I burn a bridge with a broker and they have a building listed for you, they're still going to work with me, but they might do it reluctantly and with a bad attitude. So no, we do the SIOR lunches here in town. They're one of my favorite events because, as you mentioned, the conversations afterwards, and people are really open to share what's going on with their projects because it's good to collaborate because I might have a tenant that might go in a building that they've shown 100 times, but I got that one unique phone call like the data center, and so that collaboration. Is a big deal. Talking about brokers and the collaboration and seeing it throughout the market, I'm always curious with the developers or landlords when they hire brokers or even work with partners. Are there any things that you look for, maybe a red flag that you see or that you pay specific attention to, where you're like, I'm not working with that guy, or I have to pay attention to him, or maybe something on the opposite side where you're like, well, they did that, like they're going to be a good person to work with. I'm always curious what investors or owners look for in brokers.
That's a great question. I think our main rule is if you bring me the land, you get the listing.
Okay. And
it's a triple play. You'll get the land commission, you'll get the leasing commission, and you'll participate in the sale if we sell it. That really does is incentivize your brokers to keep bringing you business, like land sites, which is not that complicated. I think where the differentiation to me is if you're less than competent, I'll still work with you. If you're dishonest or have a bad reputation, that's when I kind of draw the line. I'll even work with a young broker as long as I feel like they have the acumen and the ability to kind of figure it out. I don't hire for skill. I hire for ability to have skill. That's how I would look at my employees. I don't want you to know everything. I just want to make sure that you have the smarts and the ability and the energy to figure it out, because you'll get there and you'll be a better person for it. But if you're dishonest or disliked, frankly, then that's where I'm going to try okay, I don't want to work with you. And I always talk about the silent hand. It is a silent hand of business that people don't even realize why it's happening. If you have a bad reputation, or if you're a contractor or somebody who's maybe doesn't pay their bills on time, you suddenly don't get on bid lists and you don't even know why. Because most people either don't have the energy or the willingness or just don't want to deal with it to confront somebody on it and say, hey, you're not the kind of person I want to work with. I'd rather just ignore it and kind of just push off to the side. That's what I determine who I want to work with.
Kind of the gut check, like a gut check with it. So you might check on reputation then before going in with them, just as far as like people you might know and kind of see if you've never worked with them, kind of check the local market. That's interesting.
Yeah.
They it's amazing. I'll say this over and over and over. This is just too small of an industry, too small of a town, and it's too easy to burn bridges. So dishonesty is obviously a big one. I appreciate you saying that about new agents and the ability to figure something out, because sometimes hungry is better than experienced. Like if you give a new broker who has somebody they can ask questions to, or I'm sorry, you get the opportunity to a new broker and they at least have a managing director or a seasoned agent they can go ask to, they will not sleep to figure out those answers, because it might be a big payday where they're at in their scale. I had a laundry tenant when I was early on in my career. I was doing like 1 to 2,000 foot leases. I mean, I was running around these little apartments, and this guy told me he needed 50,000 feet, and he was working with me because I answered my phone on a Saturday. This guy drove me all over the place, like getting him coffee. I mean, just crazy things. And at the end of it, when we finally got it done, he ended up telling me, he goes, I didn't need you. He goes, but I knew you were going to run around. And he goes, you really worked your butt off. And it was the best learning experience, because I learned how these industrial laundry facilities work with, how they have to bring water and how they set them up. It was crazy. That was it's an old school deal with, I don't know if you know Mike Lyons. He's retired, but Ben Millis, he was on the other end. But they were, I was probably 22, and they experienced agents, and I was representing this guy. It was not the easiest deal.
And I wouldn't, just a tangent on that. I don't like this in the quote unquote dating world, which I have not been in for many, many years. I don't want to chase somebody, and I wouldn't want them to chase me. But in business world, I find sometimes I want to make sure that somebody's making contact with me more than once if they want my business, because sometimes I'll think, especially, I know this is, Dan Doherty's a good friend of mine, and Kevin and those guys. These big brokerage houses, like, okay, well, if I get something from them, I should pay attention. Sometimes it's just the opposite, because I get 6, 7, 8, 10 guys looking at this thing at the same time I am. And I'm like, I'd rather get something from, I've got some of my best deals from brokers who are either inexperienced in smaller shops who don't know what they have. And they meet with me because I made time for them, and they say, this is where I got, how do I do it? 9 times out of 10, there's nothing for it. 1 time out of 10, there is something. Like, well, what you got is something I want to buy, and here's how I do it. So you just have to, sometimes you got to be hungry enough just to keep persistence, not being annoying, you know what I'm saying? But like you, picking up that phone on a Saturday makes a big difference, and it got you a deal. So you never know.
That deal was more than I made the 2 years before that. But I was working for it. No, you did that with Erik Larkin, who's an industrial broker in my office at NAI. You met with us several years ago. We had about 110 acres just shy of, and it had a rail spur on it. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't had any experience at the time with that. And we actually reached out to you, and you went to lunch with us, and you were looking at the site. And it wasn't even like, hey, what do you want to buy this? It was more like, hey, what do you think? And you looked at it and you're like, this isn't for us, but here's why. And this is this is who you might want to talk to. And this is rail. Anyways, you just had, again, the been there, done that experience. Right. And I hadn't done a deal with you guys at the time. And, doing those meetings, like you said, it could have been something, which is a big deal.
Yeah, never know.
What about like you said dishonesty on the red flag, but is there something with brokers that you see where you're like, that's a really good trait? Like, I like that. People might have different ones where, I don't know, maybe they're on time or early or something.
Yeah, I think some of it is it wasn't easy in the last, I think 18 months, and it wasn't easy after the recession, but don't be the broker who just forwards over information on a site with no thought in mind. I always have to say, what's the play? And a good broker will tell me what the play is. Here's what I think. And maybe they don't know, and they say, I don't really know what the play is. I think there's something here. Then just tell me that. It's fine. We'll figure it out together. But I think having some logical reason why you're pitching something. Okay. If there's a building somewhere that you like, and here's what the play is, and we could especially if it's a redevelopment play or it's a land site somewhere, I said, well, what's the zoning? What kind of building do you envision on this thing? Those are the ones that stand out on me. The people who understand the market enough to know what is the play, and not just show me a flyer on something or give me a building. And I also look for, because we're an institutional developer and our partners are institutional, we have these huge pension funds and insurance companies. They ask questions, expect answers that are at the top of the business. They want to know exactly what everybody's talking about, why, and where I kind of was shocked after I got into business, because my parents were academics. That's what they did. So when you have no business experience on my side, what it came down to after 20, 30, 40 years in the business is people know your opinion. There's no right or wrong answer. It's, well, this person's been doing this for so long, they have an opinion. The brokers are the same way. I have to ask the broker, where's the rent going? Well, it's going up. It always goes up. Like, I might call BS on that. It's like, no. Carl's saying is trees don't grow to the sky. At some point they stop growing. Rent's the same way, right? When's it going to start going down? When's it going to flatten out? What's the free rent? What's the competitor doing? Things that you just have to know off the top of your head. And I'm not going to drill you on it or make you look stupid, but I'll note it. Like, if you don't know what your competitors are doing, I got 3 buildings of the same size, delivering at the same time. One's motivated to sell, one's motivated because they got a loan coming up. If you know that stuff, it's going to help me determine if you're the broker I want to work with. Because that guy behind me is Prudential or MetLife or whatever, they're going to hammer me if I don't have the information. I expect you to know what you're talking about. And again, it's silent. I'm not going to confront you on it. I just won't work with you anymore. That's the bottom line. That's what's, you may not give her that call like, hey, you screwed up, but you won't get the call.
That's fair enough.
It's
so
even worse.
Luck favors the prepared. Meaning
Yes.
No, you're right. I mean, that happens. I'll get emailing, like you probably get 1 million emails a day, texts and calls, and where if somebody just sends you a flyer from a competing broker, you've probably already seen it.
Right.
But maybe if that competing broker, I don't know, maybe sent it to you, but they didn't give an explanation. Maybe you really didn't look at it. But if I were to send you something with like, hey, this site, you could put maybe 2 50,000-foot buildings on it. I know this tenant's looking here. I think you could get this rent.
Right.
What do you think of that kind of play on this? It's going to get you a more attention because market knowledge, and I'm trying to give you a reason to buy it.
Right.
Yeah, they always, it's always, even just dealing with a potential tenant or buyer, that's something that I took a long time to learn, which is don't just tell them, hey, here's this building. Tell them like, hey, this is close to your house, or
Right.
this is close to your location. Like give them information that might be relevant to why they would want it. That's interesting. I had a question here. Oh, as all this development, I mean, we talked about data centers and that. Nevada recently changed it to where you have to go from swamp cooler, evaporative coolers in warehouses to air-conditioned cooler or air-conditioned warehouses. Where do you see that going with industrial here in town? Like obviously it's making it more expensive, but do you think that change is going to maybe bring in new technologies for warehouse development that you might have not seen 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe tenants into Las Vegas that might have not come here because they had they wanted air-conditioned warehouse? So I guess it's almost like nicer warehouse space.
Yeah.
But I guess the first part of that question is, are you seeing any new technologies coming as far as insulation or how they're cooling warehouses that really weren't relevant? We keep talking about the invisible hand. I mean, if there's a way to insulate and air condition a warehouse cheaper than the current way, someone's going to figure it out. So
Yeah.
I was curious the forefront of that stuff.
I think we're in the beginning of it.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of hullabaloo, and I was kind of one of the ones that was probably saying it too much, that it's going to increase costs $15 a foot, because it's a natural saying. Well, if conditioning is $15 a foot, you got to it's the equipment, the increased power requirements, and the insulation, and all the other stuff you have to do to a roof deck to prep it for air conditioning, as opposed to EVAPs. But I think when you get in, the math isn't as bad as it was. The ongoing maintenance costs make up for some of that, because you got to replace these EVAPs much more frequently than you do with an RTU. But I think necessity is the mother of all invention, of course, and so somebody's going to figure it out. But I think to your point, yeah, maybe it is going to increase our Class A space in town. And I do think people are going to come up with more solutions that are going to help us deal with this. And in Reno, conditioning warehouses doesn't happen, because you have such a huge difference between night at air and temperature and day.
Mm-hmm.
It could be 90 and 50. So you just reverse the units we have on the building and bring in cold air at night, and it makes the building 65, 70 all day long. So it's really a Southern Nevada issue, and more in Phoenix. Phoenix has been ahead of this a long time.
Oh,
But they're also 5 to 10 degrees hotter than we are. So, because there's so much, I don't know if the heat, the asphalt desert they call it, where you have that heat index that goes up because of the amount of paving in the market.
yeah.
But it's what I want is a level playing field. Everybody has to do it, fine. The older product, although it'll be cheaper, it's older product. It's not conditioned. So there's going to be things that tenants going to have to weigh out. And by the way, we found out during COVID that what tenants been paying or telling us about paying rent has really been debunked. Well, we can only pay this much in rent. Well, they're probably 3 times what they used to pay in the last 10, 15 years. And over the last, 5 years, it's gone up double.
Double.
Yeah. So they're expecting a higher level of building. We're going to have to deliver a higher level of building, and somebody, to your point, will figure out how to make these buildings more efficient. We don't have the power, endless power supplies for some of the initiatives we're having. So that's a bigger concern, I think, in my mind, is all we're doing is taxing the grid more, but it is what it is. You have to weigh out one to go with the other.
I did part of the reason, obviously, we switched to the air-conditioned warehouses is water. Swamp coolers take water to cool it, and it's funny. I actually rode my motorcycle out to Hoover Dam last weekend. It's a fun ride from Las Vegas, and I do it quite often. I was looking at pictures from the years past that I take out there, and I was like, wait a minute, it looks like it's higher up. I'm like, why are we? So I don't know if we just have more water or these initiatives are helping, but you could tell it was up from a couple of years ago just from the pictures I was looking at.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, even the way these warehouses get insulated. So sticking on the topic of technology, are you seeing anything with like artificial intelligence in development? I know everybody's talking about ChatGPT, and I'm actually taking a course right now on artificial intelligence and how it's being implemented right now with our industry specifically. Are you seeing anything on the development side that you guys are implementing or using, or maybe something on the horizon where you're like, something you're going to implement that is artificial intelligence related?
It definitely will. I think more on the design front than the building itself, and you'll see different products, 3D printing and things like that will come into existence with parts and things we're doing. And that's already probably happening. I think it's more on the design side. I think the thing that's been the most, I guess, innovative part, and this is part of the Amazon business, but any complicated building, and then it goes to any building whatsoever, is BIM, which is really a way of clash detection within design. And I'm embarrassed to say BIM is building imaging. I can't remember.
It's okay. I don't know half the acronyms I use in the industry.
But it's, I should know that because I just said it. But what it does is clash detection is if you build a building with several pieces of conveying equipment or material handling equipment and you have multiple decks in a building, BIM will allow you to look at a 3D rendering or vision of that building where you can look at where penetrations are, where the conduit's coming through to make sure that you're not moving stuff in the field. That's been a huge innovation for me of saying, okay, we have you have the basic structural design, you have an architectural design, you have the MEPs, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, you have fire, then you have material handling. All those components, sometimes they're talking to each other, sometimes they're not. So you get a shell drawing completed, the material handling guy puts his work in, the plumber's going, well, wait a minute, I got a pipe stand here for my toilet, and you got material handling equipment over it. If you did BIM correctly, the clash detection will see what the clashes are. And that saves a lot of money in the field about having to move things or redesign stuff in the field. So that's probably been the biggest game changer to me in the last few years of having that implemented to save costs in the field.
Some of that stuff is just huge. Like because always a question I like to ask developers, like how they were doing things 10 years ago and now, and obviously that's a big one. I'm really shocked to see how fast this stuff's moving. I'm really curious to see where we're going to be in a couple of years. And you and I were talking before we got on the podcast about travel and your guys' presence in Europe. I was in Switzerland after that MIPIN conference. I went to go visit some friends, and I went and toured a chemical warehouse. And it was interesting even to see how they build their warehouses is just much different than we do here because of their climate and space. And they were doing like these like cast walls. They did the foundation, and instead of doing a tilt up, they were like Legos, and they're putting them together. It was really cool. It's not something I've seen because obviously I've never seen that here. You mentioned you guys are going to be doing some stuff in the Middle East. I mean, everybody mentions Dubai. I was actually in the Middle East in November and December of last year. I spent some time in Jeddah and Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Abu Dhabi. I don't know, it was a sense, and they were building there like crazy. Like it doesn't even make any sense how fast they're doing things there. So what markets are you in there, and what do you guys?
So what was announced, and I don't know anything more than this, Saudi Arabia.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
I spent some time there, it was crazy. I can't even describe like what they were doing there and how fast they were doing it. So I have a personal question for you. You are obviously a big developer. Do you, after Panattoni builds a building, do you guys have different exit strategies? Do you guys keep any of them for cash flow, or is your guys' play mostly build them, lease them, sell them?
It's all of the above. I would say we're bent toward merchant.
Okay.
And that's really based on our capital structure.
Okay.
So we have some buildings and some developments we do with in-house with our own funds. I have several buildings in Las Vegas that we own with my partners.
Okay.
Just for long-term cash flow and asset value. We bought Shelby, for example, on the 15 because it's irreplaceable real estate.
Yeah, it's a great spot.
Yeah. And that was a trade that I did with the Panattoni family. So we'll keep that as far as, it's just long-term real estate. But most of the time, our capital structure is such that they're IRR driven. They're a fund, either closed or they're a pension fund who has to recycle capital to get in their coffers. But sometimes the capital will say, hey, we want to stay in. But because we're a development company, we're very capital intensive. So it's usually best for us as an overall structure. What we do is we build a building on spec, we get it leased up, then what's called crystallization of our ownership. And then if we sell, then we split proceeds or they buy us out. It depends on what happens and how they want to keep it.
If you don't mind me asking personally, do you invest in anything other than commercial real estate? This is a conversation Dan Doherty and I had on this, where I'm always surprised how many brokers don't own real estate. And sometimes there's a conflict of interest. So as a broker, you have to be careful with that. Mm-hmm. But like, I know guys who are big on mutual funds or index funds or something along with real estate. Do you, if you don't mind me asking, how do you stick to primarily real estate, or do you have kind of how do you personally invest? And the reason I ask this is coming up as a new agent, I didn't even know what to do when I made a little bit of money, right. And then I realized I had to save to pay taxes. That was a rude awakening. But yeah, if you don't mind me asking, do you how do you personally do?
Well, I think I follow the rule of diversification.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have real estate assets owned. My wife and I own with various members of the company. We have real estate we own what's called my local partner investment vehicle. In other words, within my office, we own land, we just have assets within the company that we own individually. But then outside of that, I have, I'm not a residential real estate guy. I don't really like owning houses, but I own one outside my own personal one, and I'm like, it's been okay, but that's not really my bailiwick. I don't really think the returns are there, and I don't really like the whole nature of residential real estate. That's just not my investment.
You stick to what you know.
Yes. Then outside of that, it's, I keep cash in savings accounts just because, you never know what you're going to do. I have a lot of stocks that I buy just because I think it's fun to do it. And I'm not a trader. I just buy because I think it's a good long-term asset. Okay. Amazon, I bought years and years ago. I bought Prologis years and years ago because I thought it was a good play. And then, like anybody, because I'm an employee as well as a partner, I maximize my 401k and I put in high growth stocks just because, even though my age should say it should be moderate or low, to me, it's just kind of an aggressive time to have some fun with the 401k because, it's insurance, I guess, lack of better words. So I think it's diversification of cash, muni bonds, stocks, different types of investments that are kind of outside the realm of what most people do. Just because of my advisors tell me that I should look at something, I will, and if it looks good, I'll invest in it.
Got it. They, it's agents. Again, advice I wish I would have gotten when I was 20, which is start your, whatever it's a 401k or an IRA or Roth, whatever. Just start early and be consistent about it.
Yeah, usually have a 25% return off the bat. That doesn't sound too bad. So
no,
I tell people don't not do that.
Yeah, you mentioned advisors and stuff like that. When you're looking at a deal or underwriting it, I know you're a numbers guy, it sounds like, but do you ever have like a deal that you get and you're like, this thing pencils out, but it doesn't pass the gut check and you don't do it, or like, I mean, how do you, when you get a deal, are there any, I always like to ask this both ways, where it pencils out, but the gut check isn't there, or it doesn't pencil out and your gut check's there? Like, have you ever had an instance where like it didn't quite pencil out, but you're like, I need to do this, and you did it and it ended up being a win?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment. I think IGT Campus was a great initial, like, hey, this makes all the sense in the world. It didn't turn out as well as we thought because I think it took too long. So we're IRR driven. So the longer it takes, the worse it gets for us, just because of our capital structure. But I think a lot of times I'll say the thing pencils, I know it passes my gut check, but I don't know if I can get capital on board. And then the worst case is the capital says, we'll do it because you want to do it. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that.
Okay.
You either want to do it or you don't want to do it. Don't rely on me, because then you're going to blame me if it doesn't go right. But I think mostly it comes down to, I like the deal, it makes sense, but can I get debt and can I get capital? If I can't get the last two things, then whatever I think is just, it's folly. It doesn't really matter. So plenty of deals make sense, but for whatever reason, the way the markets are right now, you just can't get them done, so you don't even bother.
That's a great nugget of information that you just said is partners, like with partners, whether it's capital partners or regardless, partners can be tough. Yeah. And if they're not all on board and you're not on the same page, in my experience, that's always don't do it, because right. It just it can never, if it ends poorly, it can end really poorly, and you don't want to burn that relationship over one deal.
Right.
Yeah, the gut check's always a big deal. I always, there's some agents in our office that are really analytical and spreadsheets on everything, and I'm kind of the opposite. I just see something, I'm like, this will work, and they're like, well, it doesn't pencil. I'm like, it's fine, we'll figure it out. That's kind of how I like to run around. So yeah, we covered quite a bit here. We mentioned working out, but do you have any hobbies that you like to do off time? Like you said, you still play guitar. Like, are you still in a band, or you just play for fun when you have some time at home? Or
no, and embarrassing enough, I mean, when I was playing professionally, I didn't have any money, so I didn't have a lot of equipment or guitars. Now I have plenty of guitars, and I don't have a lot of time or inclination. So that's one thing I think I hate New Year's resolutions, but that was one of them. Like, I need to pick my guitar up more often on the weekends. But there's a couple of people get people my age who are exceptional musicians. We get together and play every once in a while. And we played a couple things just for fun. I played a wedding a few years ago where I was asked hey, could you come in as a bass player? And when you played for so long, most of the songs that you give you a set list and like, oh, I can do this in a heartbeat. So it's no big deal. But I think mostly we love to travel. I got a lot of family.
Okay.
I got 9 grandkids.
Oh.
And my oldest is going to graduate from Sacramento State in this winter. My second oldest is a tanker in the Army now. I was at his graduation last week in Georgia. So, I mean, there's never a time where we don't have things, family or go do this, go do that. And my wife is 100% on all the time. Let's do stuff. Let's go, like we'll go to Europe twice a year or whatever we're doing, but we're not people that sit idle.
That's good. So 9 grandkids. No wonder you're still working. Christmas is expensive.
Yes.
So how many kids do you have? You just said
4.
You have 4 kids and 9 grandkids. Okay, family's getting bigger.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's cool. Are they? You said you were at the graduation in Georgia. Are they all in Nevada, or everyone's spread out?
No, half are in California, half are in Iowa.
Iowa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So not that close together. I know what that's like. I have 3 siblings, and they all live.
My grandson's in the Army, and my son's in the Navy.
Okay.
And then my second daughter, my third daughter, so the 2 older ones were with my ex-wife, and then Brianna, she works for us in Denver. She's on my team, basically. And my son's in the military in Coronado. Then my 2 older daughters, one's at a school, and the other one works in Davis, California.
Okay. Both Davis and Coronado are both nice parts of the California. So I always like to ask advice for new agents coming up, or maybe people who are experienced and want to get into development. There's something that you mentioned earlier about proximity, that you like to be around people that are going to help you grow. That's something that, again, took me a while to learn. I was like, why would I go to a brokerage with all these other industrial guys? And then come to find out that's exactly where I wanted to be, because you want to talk about ideas. Deals bring deals, my old broker used to say. So like proximity is like a big one. Do you have any tips even about getting around proximity, or any other suggestions you might give a new developer or a new broker that you've seen on the developer side where they should spend some time and energy?
Well, I think some of it is just education. I mean, with a sociology degree, I wasn't at all prepared to be a builder. And I actually came into the construction side of Panattoni. That's really where I came in with my resume, as I could build buildings. So I think I took classes at community college in Sacramento. I read a lot of books. I tended to read biographies. I don't know, for some reason it was more motivating to read like Lee Iacocca back in the day, where he was an engineer who came to run, Chrysler. Things that kind of are motivating personal stories that I enjoyed. I read a lot of military books for some reason. I thought I was fascinated by World War II and Patton and his leadership style, which could be pretty abrasive.
He's a very interesting guy.
Yes, but he helped us win the war.
Yeah.
Yeah, and guys like that, I mean, you can't, my utmost respect to the military is you can't have, sometimes you have to be just black and white and just, somebody that guy will run through any wall for the country. And sometimes you just have to have people like that. It gives you like, okay, we're good. We've got people around us who are going to charge ahead and make sure that we're good as a country. So those type of people you can learn from. His personal skills were obviously lacking at times, but education, I think, was a big deal. Being around people that I thought I respected, wanted to be like, kind of learn from people, and sometimes learn what not to do. It's the same lesson.
Yeah.
But I think mostly asking questions. I mean, you mentioned something right before we started. Well, I did build-to-suits all over the country. I mean, I walk into a small town and here's my client and I got to build a building. Don't act like you know what you're doing, because you don't. I mean, you may know how to build a building, but you walk in the municipality and say, hey, I'm from blank. I have no idea how your program works. Are you able to help me? And they 9 times out of 10, they're helping you. If they're not, it's because they don't want to, or, some other reason, but they're more than happy to lend you a hand. So that's kind of like, just ask. It's fine. People will help you.
Yeah, they'd way rather, admitting you don't know everything. But like you said this earlier on, is you don't know what you don't know, and people are typically willing to help you. So education and ask a lot of questions, and don't pretend like you know everything that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
be humble. It's okay.
Be humble. That was another lesson I learned early on, because I got licensed while I was in college, so I did the whole night class, weekend class, working during the day thing, and I just really quickly realized that these people who have been in business for 20 years, they might not be in real estate, but they've rented or bought enough real estate, they know what they're doing. And if you say something that you don't know the answer to, they know immediately the good gut check. So just to say the question, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that question, but I'll find it out for you. It was like the best sense.
It's a very hard thing to say, but I don't know. Yeah.
I still say it because I don't have all the answers all the time. I was filling in. There's someone on my team. I was filling in on a tour yesterday, and they asked me a bunch of questions on the building. I had no idea. Right. I just told them, I'm just here because I have the keys. I'll answer what questions I have. But that's interesting. As far as to say, the tips would be education, ask a lot of questions, and don't be arrogant are probably my words that I'll
and the obvious one is work hard, which goes to that same, but it is pretty basic. Show up every day, work hard.
That's a good one. It's always cool to see new agents coming into our office and they're learning. There's a guy, his name's Billy. He's in there every day and he's making phone calls. Like, he keeps doing something,
right? And
like something's gonna stick, and it's cool to see it. There's another agent in our office he's a CPA. He's starting to get some listings. He was doing like a little 1,000 or 2,000 square foot. It's about his third year, and now he's got some land listed, and he sold a building. I'm like,
good for him.
Yeah, it's so don't get discouraged. Just keep doing it. Yeah. So just kind of wrapping up here, I appreciate you taking the time. I mean, any other advice that you could throw out there in your worlds of your wisdom? Because as I mentioned, I don't know if it was on the podcast or before, like when I first got into this business and I saw people like yourself on stage or these seasoned brokers who had signs all over the valley, I was nervous to talk to them, and I just didn't even know where to start. And so now that I have you here, I just like to see, is there any kind of tidbit of information you'd like to I don't know, maybe a change in the industry or
yeah. I mean, obviously COVID was a huge disruptor.
Oh.
And you could good or bad, you can pontificate whether we should have this total shutdown like we did. I wasn't a big fan of it, but I think the lack of cohesiveness in our country right now is really disconcerting to me. I mean, I've been around a while. I'd like to think I have views from the left and right, and I can kind of meld and just have conversations. I think for us, if I was to tell young people in the businesses, you got to be around other people. I was, and as a sociology major, I said there's a reason why we have cities and towns. Otherwise, people would be scattered along the hinterlands doing their own thing and not being around people. We're social animals. We want to be around other people.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, for restaurants and things like that's a town. The co-op in the middle of a farm field is because, the farmers bring their stuff in and they have the grain and they all go together and they pay for the co-op because that's the nature of a co-op. So if you're not in the office and you're trying to be a new broker, whatever business you're in, if you're not in the office, your growth will be basically, I can't imagine you can grow. And maybe that's okay with you. Maybe you say, okay, I want to work at home or I don't want to be around the office or whatever, but that's not a recipe for success. You have to be around people that you can talk to. And even now, I'm not required to go to the office in Reno. It doesn't really matter if I'm there or not. But as a habit, I've been doing this for so many years where you get up, you get dressed, you get your coffee, you go to the office, And for me, it's like I could just grab my laptop and my iPad and sit over there on the dining room table and sit there and do work all day. That's not me. I want to be around other people. So I think probably my biggest advice, other than working hard, is just collaborate, learn from others, participate like we talked about, go on these lunches and just random lunches, go to ask somebody that you have an interest in learning what they do. Because I try to remember when I was younger, as dumb as it sounds, like, what do I want to remember when I'm 60 and I'm 25 now? What do I want to, my mentality is, what caused that person to be successful? And as you look back and I think, believe it or not, people who are 25 or 30 want to know what I did, but I'm always assuming they don't care, because people like start pulling on threads with me and say, well, how'd you do that? And I'm like, well, I just did it. I don't really know, how'd you get from A to B to C to D or whatever, but you just kind of plug along, and the good things start happening because you're there, and it just seems silly to me that people want to know this path, because the path is never clear. Whatever path you have set out, you have to retrace your steps and go back and do this one and do that one. But I think just being there, working every day, being around people, learning, never stop learning, and be a good, decent human being, you're fine. It'll just take a while, but you'll get there.
The collaboration is such a big deal. For a while, I was at a brokerage where I was just like at home. They're like, oh, you keep all your money and all that, your commissions and splits. And I just realized how like it got depressing after a while. And when I got around other brokers where we're talking about ideas and, you have a big bullpen area and people are they're talking. And again, the lunches and NAIOP and CCIM lunches, it's just I always get some nugget of information that's helpful. Even like stuff, people having the guts to like take risk and opportunities, like doing this podcast. Even like I'm in a group called EO, it's Entrepreneurs Organization, and like there was one of the guys, he's the one who's like, hey, you should start like a podcast. And I'm like, what? Like, why would you? I don't get it. Now here I am like try it, see if it works. Like, and have the guts to try things, and if it works, great. If not, it didn't work. So I like that one. They be around people. I have a couple questions here I wanted to ask you that I highlighted. We were talking about luck favors the prepared. I have my outline here with the highlighted stuff I wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. Did you ever have like an aha moment where like you've done a certain amount of development and you were like, I made it. Like I'm one of these developers who like, maybe I have some money in the bank. My family's like, I'm not struggling to pay bills, but like maybe a client you worked with or a big project that you never thought you would have been doing, a 1 million square foot building, just like an aha moment, like holy smokes, like I'm at this certain level. Yeah,
I think it was the Amazon relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did buildings for them in 98, 99, 2000, but I think the last 5 years really was, to your point, kind of like, okay, that's kind of the pinnacle of my career, even though I'm not retiring anytime soon, but it's like, okay, I've been doing this a long time, but now one of the largest companies in the world trusts us enough, and me in particular, to handle this bulk of their account. That's it, and the way they do things. I always say, if Amazon listens or don't listen to me, they're firm, but they're fair, and they're demanding, but they treat you right, and they're what they say they carry on, even if it's a verbal. I know I can count on them. So you have a great client with a lot of need that you're able to take care of. That was like, all right, I think this is a good way for me to finish out my career here.
I think that's a pretty good benchmark. Amazon. I mean, they're just this tiny little company. So you're doing warehouses for them all over the country.
Yeah, in North America.
That's crazy. That's a pretty good aha moment.
Yep.
As you were coming up in your career, did you have any mentors or influence, like direct influences that really helped shape who you became as a developer and as a business person?
Yeah, I think one, certainly Carl Panattoni, who I learned a lot from, and his family and his way of doing things. Obviously, it influenced how I conduct myself. But the one who pulled me out of the nonprofit world was a gentleman named Bob Erickson, who was one of so everybody from Sacramento industrial real estate comes up from Buzz Oates. Buzz Oates was a bombardier during the war, classic story. He came back from the war and started his own business and became a huge warehouse developer in Sacramento Valley.
Okay.
Up from Bakersfield north, and then he's got stuff in Phoenix and in Salt Lake. But Carl Panattoni was one of his partners too. So Bob was one partner with Buzz, and I was working on a project. It was public partnership, and Bob was the developer. And I went to him and said, "Hey, Bob, I need to get out of this. What I'm doing, can you consider me for something in your company?" And about a month later, he called and said, "I got a job if you want to take it." And that was it. That got me out of the nonprofit world, which was great, but it was my service to my country. I was done. That was 1989, so I owe a lot to Bob, and then certainly Carl and my parents, and of course my wife. I mean, even during COVID, that's one of the few people in the world I never get sick of being around is my wife. I don't know why. We just get along really well. So during times of COVID and with stress and things, she's always been the rock for me and vice versa. But, and my parents taught me a lot of ethics and how to conduct yourself. Even if they weren't in the business world, they appreciate, what we do because we give back. We're very charitable in our community. So that's something I think you can learn from people that you respect and you want their admiration. That's what your goal is, to have them admire you. So it goes both ways.
So you had a couple people, parents, your wife, the Bob Erickson, and Carl Panattoni, which is obviously, he's the founded Panattoni. Was there something specific that Bob Erickson might have said or like done that you're like, oh, like, I don't know. I sometimes have these aha moments with people who I ask questions to, and like one conversation changed the trajectory of my career.
Well, it's kind of like I was talking about before. He hired me because he felt I had the goals, the drive and the acumen to figure it out. He knew I didn't know what I was doing. There's no way he knew what I was doing, because I didn't. But I was able, at least in that role, to learn on the job. And that's something that he trusted me enough to know that I could figure out what I needed to do, and I did it. Not everybody can do that. So that's an opportunity that, how do you put a price or a...
So he trusted you.
Yeah.
Trusted you to figure it out.
Yeah.
That goes a lot. That's funny. It's when I was in the Great Recession, I wasn't doing any I wasn't really doing many deals. People were doing 5-year deals, and now they're doing 6-month deals. Right. And I had one conversation with a guy who was a big apartment landlord, and I still do work for him. I actually just rented a retail space for him, and he told me, you're looking at this all wrong. This is the best time to cultivate relationships. And we came up with some creative ways of talking to special receivers and getting in front of bankers. Right. And I started giving him information. He goes, just give him information. So I'd take pictures of buildings that were kind of abandoned, like the tenants were taking care of them. The owner knows they're going to get foreclosed on, so they're not taking care of it, and the bank hasn't foreclosed yet. Right. So I started taking pictures of broken glass or weeds growing. I just started mailing them to people, and I was shocked after doing that. Then they started calling me back, going, what's going on with the building? I'm like, call a handyman, like board up your building. And
right. Protect your asset. Right.
That was one conversation, though, that totally changed the trajectory of my career, because I asked he told me, and I listened to him because he was paying me to lease commissions. And
it was tough for brokers because there was nothing going on.
No.
You need transactions, good or bad.
Yeah.
It could be negative for the developer or positive for the bank or vice versa, but there's nothing going on. You're right. You have to use that time wisely. Work hard when it's slow, work hard when it's fast. It's the way it goes.
Yeah, even in 2024 right now, we have the election going on. There's conflicts going on throughout the world. The interest rates are up, so things have slowed down a little bit. I keep telling people, this is make phone calls, because you stay in front of people, give them information. When things pick up, they're going to remember you're out running around. That's another thing someone said, a client of mine. He goes, you were still bugging me when there were no deals going on. He goes, I figured if you made it through the recession, you knew what you were doing. I was like, I didn't think of that. I just really had nothing else going on.
Right.
So final couple questions. Do you have one favorite book? You said you like to read a lot of biographies, but is there one book that's your go-to if you were stuck on a desert island that you would take with you?
No, that's a great question. I probably should prep for this one. I've read some really good books. Believe it or not, it was probably the one by Jack Welch. I can't remember the name of it. But
that's okay. We can put it in the notes later.
Jack was, his biography, or his biography, mostly about autobiography, really, but a way he approached business. But, you chop the lower 10 of your workforce off, the 10% all the time. Low achievers, you just chop them all the time. He's brutal about it, but man alive, he was just amazing CEO. And
was it Straight from the Gut winning?
I can't remember. Might have been. It's probably 30 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll find it. We'll put it in the notes in this. It's just that's fine. There's a lot of different biographies on some of these people.
Mm-hmm. His was autobiographical.
Yeah. Was good. They so wrapping up here, 2024. We're about to hit May. Do you have anything you're looking forward to, either professionally or personally, that you might be the highlight of your year?
Yeah, I think nothing else. It's 24 we look at it as a transition year, because to your point, interest rates are up, activity's down, very contentious election's going to come up on every level.
Yeah.
Especially the presidency. I can't believe we're still doing this, but
I know Donald Trump's in court right now, and Biden. Well, anyways.
Yeah, it's not the ideal scenario. I'd look forward to travel. family. We have a lot to be thankful for, but 24 is going to be an interesting year for a lot of things. And I think for me, professionally, I have a lot to do just to kind of get this new position going and what my initiatives are. And personally, I think we look forward to trips and spending time with family. That's really what it comes down to.
That's why we work hard, so you have the ability to do it. That's one of my. It's always people ask like, "What's your why for working?" That's one of mine. Is just I never want to be able to say no to an adventure or be invited. That's pros and cons of this business. Is one, you're always working. I travel a fair amount, but I'm always available on my phone and computer. Like I work, it doesn't matter what time zone I'm in.
Right.
But it also doesn't allow you the luxury of like some jobs where when you're on vacation you can totally unplug.
Right.
Doug, I really appreciate you coming in. I could take this on for 2 hours, but I'm sure we all have, or you probably have some other meetings you get to. A lot of really good information that you shared. I really appreciate the time, and I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Sounds good. Thank you.